Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this session at the Africa Pavilion, which will be about advancing circular economy for climate resilience in Africa. So we know today is the second last day of COP, so we're very grateful that you made a point to join us today for this session, which is hosted by the African Circular Economy Alliance, the African Circular Economy Facility, and the United Nations Environment Program. My name is Bertrand Samoa. I'm an associate partner with Dalberg. I'm also the country director for Côte d'Ivoire. And for those of you who are not familiar with Dalberg, we are a management consulting firm that focuses on supporting Global South countries with their social and economic development challenges, including as it pertains to the circular economy and climate change. Now, the Dalberg is also the entity that runs the Secretariat for the Alliance. And if you're not aware of what the Alliance is, the African Circular Economy Alliance was founded in 2016. It is a government-led coalition of ministers of environment who are collaborating with the private sector and international institutions to advance the agenda for the circular economy on the continent. And I'm particularly excited to moderate today's side event, because we at the Alliance believe that the circular economy should really take center stage in discussions around climate in general, because the circular economy intersects quite nicely with both mitigation and adaptation goals for African countries. As you know, I assume many of you know, circularity is about being more efficient in the way you use and reuse products so that you can extend their lifetime as long as possible. But it's also about making products in a way that would allow you to take them apart more easily and hopefully reuse those components or repurpose them so that nothing goes to waste. So in that sense, on the mitigation side, the more circular you are, the less you have a need to manufacture new products. Therefore, you're going to emit less greenhouse gases. The more circular you are, and the more efficient you are with your use of resources, which is going to help with your adaptation goals as well. So that's the big reason why we're here today. And for today's session, we'll have opening remarks by Dr. Anthony Nyong, who is the Director for Climate Change and Green Growth at the African Development Bank. So Tony will kick us off, followed by Mr. Emmanuel Siakilo from the African Union. He's a senior climate adaptation and climate change advisor. We'll then have a keynote speech by Ms. Rose Mwebaza, who is the Africa Regional Director for UNEP, before we go into the panel discussion, which will include Ambassador Tuula Yrjölä from Finland. We'll also have on the panel Ms. Davina Milenge, who is the task manager for the African Circular Economy Facility. And we will also have Ms. Seoya Chere from Chad, who is a director at the Ministry of Environment of Chad. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and I will now yield the floor to Tony for the opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Bertrand. Good morning, everyone. Honorable Ambassador, I had a nice tutorial this morning on how to pronounce your name. Ambassador Tuula Yrjölä. Sounds so much like a name from my village anyway, so I like that. You're welcome, Your Excellency. Ms. Rose Mwebaza, the Regional Director for Africa, UNEP. You're welcome, good morning. Then, as we've already been told, Mr. Emmanuel Siakilo. He's here representing the African Union Commission. And we also have, representing the African Union Commission, we have Ms. Soya Chere, representing the country from Chad. Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome. The African Development Bank is pleased to host this event today that will spotlight an integrated pathway to significantly contribute to Africa's climate action through the circular economy. Many people have wondered, what is it? What makes it circular? And I'm sure that in today's session, you have experts that will tell you exactly what that is. And scaling up action to address climate change has been at the heart of the discussions past 2 weeks here at COP. Africa, as a continent hit hardest by the effects of climate change, aims to redouble its efforts to adapt to the changing climate and the challenges it poses. And also, let me add, to the opportunities it brings. We have a very negative narrative when it comes to Africa and climate change. All we see and hear of is the doom, the gloom, the vulnerability, the hardest hit, and so on. And we take our minds off the fact that we have loads of opportunities that we can put on the table. And as I've said, Africa indeed has loads of opportunities to not only address its climate change, but also present itself as a global solution to climate change. And what that means is that we have to look for better ways of telling our story and presenting the opportunities that we have. The circular economy provides a veritable avenue to achieving this, especially in building resilience in Africa. The circular economy is a solution that has the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by up to 60% by 2050, while supporting a sustainable clean energy transition. Not just for mitigation, but it also has opportunities to bolster climate adaptation by fostering resilience in communities through localized regenerative practices. The circular economy offers opportunities in Africa across a range of sectors, including regenerative agricultural practices and composting as an alternative to chemical fertilizers, circular manufacturing and recovering of valuable components, integrated waste management, refurbishing, and recycling of products, and the list just goes on and on. Africa cannot afford to continue in a linear economic model. You harvest, you eat, you dispose. We cannot. The continent is considered the next frontier for global production, given its abundant unexploited natural resources, especially in energy and agriculture. Consumer spending is growing exponentially, and by 2030, the demand for food in urban areas will reach about $1 trillion. All this call for a shift in the production model from a linear one to minimize resource waste. Beyond being a solution to mitigate the climate crisis, the circular economy is an opportunity to drive whole of society, or you may call it whole of economic transformation and innovations. And it has massive economic potential as a solution for green growth. In Africa, the circular economy represents a market opportunity of about $8 billion annually. This is huge, and we need to take advantage of this market opportunity. You can therefore understand with me why we're hosting this side event that seeks to empower Africa to advance climate resilience through the circular economy while tapping into the billion-dollar opportunity for the continent. To lead the way for a continent-wide effort to set the African continent on a competitive and cleaner development pathway, the African Union Commission has developed a continental circular economy action plan for Africa for the period 2024 to 2034. The action plan will certainly guide Africa's transition to a circular economy model. We have assembled together stakeholders, thought leaders, from different backgrounds to give us insight on how Africa can pave the way for its sustainable future. We will achieve sustainable development goals, and we will achieve them through innovative means. And the circular economy plays a very important role in that. Here present with us, we have Her Excellency, Ambassador Tula Yola, like I've said, Ambassador of Finland. I must say that Finland is the first country worldwide to have set up a national circular economy roadmap. Finland is also engaged in advancing circularity in Africa. Together with the Nordic Development Fund, they have set up the Africa Circular Economy Facility that is hosted at the African Development Bank. The Africa Circular Economy Facility is a multi-donor trust fund dedicated to mainstreaming circular economy models in Africa. It is structured to support the creation of the necessary institutional and policy frameworks to foster the adoption of circularity on the African continent. Thank you, Ambassador. Please, you convey our gratitude to the government of Finland again. We are also indeed pleased to have with us Dr. Rose Mwabaza, the UNEP Regional Director for Africa. Always a pleasure seeing you, madam. And you will, I know, among other things, tell us how do we integrate this circularity into national processes. Today, we'll also hear about country experiences on their journeys towards circularity. We have our colleague from Chad, who is here to talk to us about that. Country representatives will showcase their policy solutions to moving the circular economy agenda forward and ensuring that the transition will also consider the challenges faced by vulnerable communities during this transition. We'll also hear from the Africa Circular Economy Alliance. This is a collaborative platform, multi-country platform that aims at fostering the creation of enabling policy environments for a circular economy. This is absolutely very important. Circular economy is not something you just jump into doing. You need to be guided by policies, by processes to ensure that you achieve what you want to achieve. The Alliance will also share best practices on the adoption and effective implementation of circular projects and initiatives that are crucial in supporting the countries in implementing the African Union Commission Circular Economy Action Plan that I've just talked about. I am convinced that these stories will inspire us to better embrace circularity and accelerate its pace towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. I thank you for your kind attention, and I wish every one of us a very fruitful deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony, for your opening remarks and for highlighting the opportunities that come with the circular economy in Africa. And to emphasize this, I would say that beyond our goals around addressing our climate and environmental challenges, we as a continent also have an imperative to develop our economies, to improve the quality of lives for our people. And we also have an imperative to create jobs for our youth especially, because we have a growing population. The population in Africa is set to double by 2050. So ideally, any solution that we bring to the table that will address our environmental challenges, around climate change, biodiversity, and pollution, should not interfere with these priorities for the continent, because we also do need to create wealth and we need to create jobs. And the circular economy, as with the numbers that you cited, so 60% potential for greenhouse gas reduction, up to 60%. In terms of contribution to GDP or economic opportunity, we're talking about billions of dollars for Africa. And I know that, in terms of job creation at the global level, we're talking about somewhere between 6 and 20 million jobs that can be created through the circular economy. So we can infer what share of that would be for Africa. So next, we'll have Mr. Emmanuel Siakilo from the African Union, who will share his opening remarks and the perspective of the African Union on the circular economy and how to expand its footprint on the continent.
Your Excellency, Ambassador, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I stand on established protocol and greet you. Good morning. My name is Emmanuel Siakilo. I work for the Africa Union Commission, the Senior Advisor, Climate Change. I think as we are all aware, Africa grapples with a number of challenges, what we refer to as polling crisis, from exponential population growth to poverty to tackling climate change impacts to pollution. And so circular economy actually presents a very important platform for reconfiguring, our economies and our workforce. So then that we ensure that the resources that we have are actually used optimally. When we last had the regional meeting on integrated waste management in Accra in 2019, it was emphasized that Africa requires a framework, on waste governance. And based on that, the Africa Union developed the Continental Circular Economy Action Plan this year, which sort of needs to, aims at helping member states to align their development plans and actions and strategies with this Continental Strategy and Action Plan. So then we ensure that we have a waste-free kind of continent, right? And so the thinking is that between 2024 and 2034, we'll have all the member states, aligning their strategies with this very important document. And that has been done deliberately because then there are a couple of challenges that were identified as to why the continent is grappling with waste, right? And one of them, as you may be aware, is around green financing. So the thinking is, where do we get the resources for countries to have efficient technologies, for countries to build capacity around these technologies, to upscale operations around waste management. So then we ensure that we do not have to keep thinking through issues of pollution, for example, which has trickle-down effects to other sectors as well. So that is one. So the other one that has been identified in this very important document is around reskilling, and public awareness and knowledge sharing. It all has to start with the mindset, more broadly, because the thinking is around how do we ensure that we manage waste from the source, even at the household level. Do we have public awareness for waste segregation, for example? Do we have public awareness around simple stuff like littering, and dumping of waste? So it has to start at that level. And how about our employers in industries? Are they aware of the skills and knowledge required to manage waste? So that is a challenge which needs to be addressed. And it was actually one of the key challenges that was identified when this Circular Economy Action Plan was being developed. And so because of that, then we think that if member states are able to integrate circular economy in their policies and action plans and their budgeting processes, then we shall be in a better position to manage waste altogether. And so I think this is a very important conversation, not just for the continent, but for the globe, because if waste is managed in all sectors, then clearly we are reducing discussions around major challenges that are facing the world today. And so with this, I want to stop here and wish everybody else a fruitful deliberation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emmanuel, and thanks to the African Union Commission for your efforts to develop this continental framework for circular economy, which will guide efforts by member countries to develop their own national plans and pursue their goals as far as expanding the footprint of the circular economy in our respective countries. And I like the point you made about awareness raising. I think it's a very important one, so that everyone at every level of the community, so this is not just an issue for decision makers, but at the family level, at the community level, there is a huge challenge around making sure that everyone understands why nothing should go to waste and why we should reuse as much as possible, why we should, when we dispose of an object, that we make sure that we sort it, provided the appropriate infrastructure is available, and why everything should start at the source, because if it's not done at the source, it becomes much more complicated further downstream. So next, we'll have Dr. Rose Mwebaza from UNEP, Regional Director for Africa, who will deliver a keynote speech and speak to how UNEP is supporting African countries with integrating the circular economy and its principles in their NDCs. Rose?
Your Excellency, Madam Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to deliver this keynote address on behalf of UNEP at this side event where we're talking about advancing circular economy for climate resilience in Africa. But allow me to begin by acknowledging and deeply appreciating and thanking our colleagues in the African Development Bank, led by Dr. Anthony Nyong, and the Africa Circular Economy Alliance for the strong partnership and collaboration we've had, as well as for giving us the opportunity to co-organize this event. I will share with you 3 key points from the perspective of UNEP. In UNEP, we know for a fact that, in fact, circular economy is something that is already deeply ingrained in the African DNA. It's the way we live. And it is a powerful driver of the work we do to address the triple planetary crisis. So within UNEP, there are multiple crises in the world, but we've cut out our cake, a piece of what we can chew and deliver to the world. And so within that, we are focusing on climate, we are focusing on nature and pollution, and within that world that we've chosen to influence, we promote circularity as part of the solutions to promoting economic well-being for the peoples, even as we seek to contribute to solving the climate crisis we are all dealing with right now, the nature crisis, but also the crisis on pollution and chemicals. And so in this COP, as we look at the crisis on pollution, on climate, I want to talk to you about what we are doing in UNEP. The first thing we look at is we view circularity as part of the entire life cycles for every activity that we look at. And as I said, that while this is gaining currency now, we know that for Africa, in fact, this is really steeped in what we do in our culture and practices. And what we think we are doing is relearning it and drawing on our vast traditional and indigenous knowledge to help us, transition back, really, as it were, to the circular economic models that are aligned to our values and customs, but also that allow us to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We believe that circular economy approaches have the potential to significantly reduce the pressure exerted on 4 out of the 5 drivers of biodiversity loss: land use change and habitat conversion, overexploitation, climate change, and pollution. We know that circularity is an essential part of the transformation we need. It supports a systems approach which not only lowers the pressure on nature, but can also foster the regenerative capacity of nature. Shifting away from the linear business model towards a circular economy in the following key economic sectors of buildings and construction, mobility, plastics, and this is one of our signature areas of engagement now. As you know, we are facilitating the development of a new international treaty on plastics, on textiles and fashion, and food. We believe will tackle over 60% of the planet's carbon footprint and over 80% of nature's footprint. We therefore see circular economy as one of the approaches that will in fact allow us to raise the ambition on our climate commitments as a global community and to help us generate green jobs. We know that the climate crisis and ever-increasing generation of waste comes with extremely high social, economic, and environmental costs for our continent. The amount of waste generated in Africa, we are told, will triple by 2050, while 70 to 80% of the municipal waste generated in Africa is recyclable. Only 4% is currently recycled, which is a minuscule amount, and only half of the waste generated is collected. Much of it is disposed in dump sites. And we know that Africa is home to 19 of 50 of the world's largest dump sites. I live in Nairobi. One of those dump sites is in Nairobi, Dandora. Many of us in many of the large African cities we probably live in can relate to that. Circularity, meaning to close the resource loop, that is how we view it in UNEP, to maintain resources and materials at the highest possible value for as long as possible along the value chain, is critical to address the climate crisis and reap other environmental, social, and economic benefits. To date, the efforts to tackle the climate crisis have largely focused on transitioning to renewable energy, complemented by energy efficiency. And while we view this as crucial and wholly consistent with the circular economy, it's important to note that this only addresses 55% of emissions. The remaining 45% comes from producing the cars we drive, the clothes we wear, the food we eat, and other products that we use on a day-to-day basis. This cannot be overlooked. The circular economy, therefore, can contribute significantly to completing the picture of emissions reduction by transforming the way we design, make, use, and dispose of products. Many African countries, unfortunately, have not yet included circular economy in their nationally determined contributions. And so in UNEP, through our 10-year framework of programs and its One Planet network, which is mandated by the UN General Assembly, we are working to shift this to ensure that we mainstream sustainable consumption and production patterns, not only at global, but at regional and national levels. And we are working very closely with other UN sister agencies to provide this understanding to our member states, ultimately with the objective of ensuring that they integrate and implement circular economy measures in their revised NDCs. We have done this by developing a toolbox to support member states to undertake this integration. We also know that the circular economy can support the creation of green jobs, especially for the youth. In Africa, we like to think of our youthful population as a dividend, but it must be well managed to produce the dividends we anticipate to see from the many young people on our continent. And so We know that if managed properly, the circular economy could create up to 11 million jobs, we are told, at least by 2030. But we must actualize that potential. And so to seize this opportunity, one of the things UNEP is doing in partnership with the ILO and UNICEF, we've developed what we are calling the Green Jobs for Youth Pact to promote green jobs for young people in Africa. This pact was launched at COP28 in Sharm el-Sheikh. We had a very good presentation of this pact to the African Ministers on Environment at AMSEN meeting that was held in this summer in Addis Ababa. And we are looking to working with several private sector companies in creating these green jobs for African youth. We are also working towards supporting a just transition as part of this boosting of jobs for youth in the sustainable economy. And together, we are working on creating new education pathways that integrate circularity, and we are working with the private sector to create at least 1 million new green jobs every year for the young people in Africa, and to work towards greening at least 1 million existing jobs for young people. We are also working with the private sector to generate at least 10,000 young entrepreneurs to start sustainable businesses in Africa. And this is already generating a lot of dialogues and trainings to support the skilling of young people to be able to take up these opportunities. For example, this year at AMSEN, as I informed you, government representatives discussed the importance of green jobs for youth in Africa and reaffirmed their commitment. Again, in the UNEP Go for SDGs program, together with ILO, we are conducting a series of training on sustainable entrepreneurship for 50 young Africans. Likewise, in cooperation with the For Impact Foundation, we have supported the development of a curriculum for green jobs, creating sustainable tourism and raising the profile of our toolkit that we've developed to promote green jobs for youth. We will need resources. Money is a great enabler for a lot of things. And so it is important that we identify the appropriate financing mechanisms and that this falls squarely within the work we do on just transition. In this regard, we are looking for strategic partners and have developed some various tools and partnerships as I've indicated already. But Africa is a continent of over 1 billion people, and so we need a lot more partners and a lot more resources. One of the tools that we have in UNEP that we are using to build these partners is the UNEP Financial Initiative, which together with Dalberg, our erstwhile moderator here, and the African Development Bank and the Africa Circular Economy Alliance have conducted a study that aims to help us understand the challenges and opportunities of financing the circular economy in sub-Saharan Africa. The report that is titled Unlocking Circular Economy Investments in Africa, the Catalyst for a Positive Change, will be published soon, and we hope it will help us identify not only financing opportunities, but pathways to follow. Again, in partnership with the Alliance for Circular Economy in Africa and the Africa Regional Standards Organization within the framework of the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement, we are supporting the development of a common continental recycling standard and supporting trade policies and regulations for food-grade polyethylene technologies to accelerate circular plastic value chains in Africa. And lastly, through the work we do with the UN Climate Technology Center and the network of the UNFCCC that is hosted by UNEP, we are supporting several countries in Africa to establish circular roadmaps. So we are not sitting on our laurels, but it's a crisis. The challenge before us is enormous, and it will take the entire village, not just the African village, but our partners across the globe. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, what do we need to do to advance circular economy for climate resilience in Africa? A few things. One, we need to support the implementation of circular economy in African countries that have already started developing the required policy frameworks. Two, we need to strengthen partnerships and alliances such as the ones I've referred to that we are working with, so that we can define common goals and collaboratively mobilize resources needed to finance the implementation of a circular economy in Africa. And lastly, we need to showcase success stories of this implementation so that people know it can be done, it is possible, that in fact it creates the jobs we are talking about and it's not a theory, and that it does transform lives and help us address the triple planetary crisis. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Rose, and thank you to UNEP for all the great work you're doing to facilitate the efforts that African countries are making in becoming more circular. And it has been a pleasure working with your team on the report that you will release very soon, and we look forward to it. And thanks also for stressing the need for African countries to include circular economy principles in their NDCs. I think this is it's becoming more and more obvious for everyone, but it hasn't always been the case. As Dr. Nyong was saying earlier, we know that the potential for greenhouse gas emissions provided by the circular economy is quite significant, so somewhere between 40 and 60%. Meanwhile, in most COPs, in most discussions around climate change, what we hear a lot about is usually centered around energy efficiency and using renewable sources, which is obviously critical. But the other key lever, in our opinion, that should be taken advantage of, should be leveraged as much as possible, is circularity. So I will now call our panelists onto the stage, starting with Madam Ambassador Tuula Yrjölä from Finland. Thank you. Anyway. Next, we'll have Ms. Davina Milenge from the African Development Bank. Now, we were waiting for Madame Thierry Seoya du Tchad. Je ne sais pas si elle est dans la salle.
I don't know if she's in the
Vous
room,
pouvez venir
so you can
au
come
podium.
on the stage.
Madame Seoya? Okay. Donc, pour ceux qui ont besoin
So
de
for those
traduction,
needing
il y a
interpreting,
des écouteurs au
there
fond
are
à
headsets at
droite, depuis mon
at
point de
the
vue.
back of the
If you need
room on
translation,
your right. From
we
my
have
point of view,
headsets in the back. Thank you. So, we'll give them a few seconds to get set. All right. So basically, with my first round of questions, I will give each of you an opportunity to introduce yourselves, your organizations and what you are doing to support circularity in Africa in your respective organizations' roles. Starting with Madam Ambassador from Finland. So as the previous speakers mentioned, Finland is a global leader in circularity. Finland was the first country to design a circular economy roadmap, a national circular economy roadmap, which we are using as a tool to guide efforts from African countries to do the same. But not only that, Finland has also contributed significantly financially to the Alliance and to the African Circular Economy Facility, which was set up last year. So without trying to steal your thunder, Madam Ambassador, I will let you go ahead and tell us more about what Finland does around circularity, why Finland has decided to take circularity so seriously, and what has led you to support Africa with this effort.
Yeah, thank you so much. And indeed, you stole half of my talking points. So let's move on to the. No, sorry. Well, I think in terms of, I'm really glad to be here. I mentioned earlier to you, I'm certainly not an expert on the circular economy. Let me just mention one reason, one thing from my recent past why I feel that circular economy and everything that we're doing here at COP is so important. For the last 4 years, I worked as the director of the Conflict Prevention Center at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And so my approach still is very much about how do we prevent conflicts. And when we think about climate change as really a conflict, let's say, potential multiplier, I still have a bit of that mindset also, so just wanted to mention that. But for Finland, we are, I was glad already that it was mentioned that Finland is indeed the first country in the world to really, publish this national circular economy roadmap already in 2016. And I think this tells you about the fact that we've had this awareness for a while already. And we want to walk the talk. So we really feel, and this goes for globally, but also very much for Africa, we're ready to offer, solutions that we have, but we're also very ready to cooperate and work together to find new solutions. And in general, I think Finland wants to be a responsible actor in promoting circular economy. And in Africa, this means partnering with African countries. And since we are a country that is at the forefront of the, in the global transition to a more circular economy, and here I think important to say that it means that we're really thinking in Finland always working public partner partnerships, working with large and small and medium-sized companies, research organizations, employing kind of a whole of society approach really to work on these issues and working also the local governments, the researchers working together to develop circular business models and a lot is based also on just voluntary commitments to promote the circular economy. So our aim is really there to do all of that and to really become a clean, let's say, as I said, a responsible actor and to become a major player in clean energy and carbon neutrality, but also circular economy. And just briefly on our relationship with African countries, we do have a long history of cooperation on the African continent that I think is a good basis for now working on this topic. And congratulations to ASEF for showing really great progress. And I hope that more countries join that effort and also other funders. Finally, maybe just to mention that the Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra, established this World Circular Economy Forum in 2017, the last of which in 2022 was organized in Kigali in Rwanda. And there the key was on a really potential for new, more resilient economic model through the circular economy in Africa. So very happy to engage on dialogue with African countries on that and with all of you. And so I'm proud to be here as a Finn.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador, and thanks again to the government of Finland for your great support and for being such a leader in this space. So now I will pass the virtual microphone to Davina. Davina, you've been heavily involved with the work of the Alliance and now with the facility. So can you share with the audience, I guess, latest developments as far as achievements from both the Alliance and the facility, including around the support that's being provided to African countries with their circular economy roadmaps?
Right. Thanks, Bertrand. Indeed, let me just begin by thanking, first of all, our keynote speakers, but also the audience that is here with us day before the last of the COP. That as part of the organizers, we appreciate you being here and also understanding that this is a very critical strategic or integral strategy in terms of transitioning Africa towards green growth. And so for us at the African Development Bank, we got into this space not very naturally, although we already had a strategy that predates the Paris Agreement, actually. So the bank strategy in 2013 was about transitioning Africa towards green growth, our 10-year strategy back then. And that involved looking at it in a very holistic way, starting from where the countries were. Much as we don't mention circular economy, a lot of, Rose mentioned it, the regional director who did the keynote, a lot of our livelihoods are actually in a very, very close to circular economy in our traditional way of living. And I think she coined a good one. Let's transition back to our traditional ways and use our indigenous knowledge on promoting circularity. Why is that? Circular economy is really very closely linked to the SDGs. So you're basically hitting the agenda on SDGs as well as the Paris agenda. You look at the SDG, the first one on poverty, it has a very direct link with job creations. Again, Madame Rose mentioned the green jobs that they're looking at. We similarly have the youth entrepreneurship programs at the bank. And 80% or above 80% of those programs are very linked to circular economy. When you look at our Youth Adapt programs, they're very linked to circular economy because that's an immediate, it has a quick win and an immediate solution. So in brief, the circular economy facility, when it was, I'm lucky to have been at the table when it was being designed, it was very difficult to articulate what circular economy is. That word is very complex for us. When we think about it on the continent, we're like, oh, waste collection, waste, but it's a system change. So it involves a lot of behavior change, how we consume, how we manufacture and dispose of. And so there is, in the transition, as we think of just transition, economic diversification, these are really the pillars of circular economy. So as we started to dig deeper in the design, we realized that we need to have business models that promote circular economy. We then, as we further dug up, we realized there were networks that are doing circular economy. The Africa Circular Economy Network is a network of practitioners, young, energetic, and innovative developers on the continent. Now that is the mass that we are trying to address. So the facility is based on three things. One, that we have the right policies. And so Chad is here. We're starting with a few countries to promote circular economy roadmaps. Two, to look into business incubation, because ultimately we have this base of innovators. You go to all our informal sectors, there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of can-do mentality, but those businesses don't scale up because of structural issues. And so that's where we focus on, trying to create incubations for the SME in the circular space. And the third one is the network, is the alliance, that we need to get our countries speak together. There was a mention that you don't see circular economy in our NDCs, and that's a gap. So with the alliance, we're trying to create awareness in the countries such that circular economy becomes the quick fix on many of the things. The one thing that circular economy has, it has the scalability. It meets you at your level. So you have the women collectors, you have the efficiencies in high industry. So it's an entire chain that you find quick wins. So for us to tip our emissions and to even build resilience, circular economy is an obvious solution. So I'll stop there, thank you.
Davina. Thanks a lot, Davina. And thanks to the African Development Bank for the leadership role you're also playing on the continent to push for more circularity and the various initiatives you have ongoing. And I like the fact that you mentioned that 80% of your programs can be linked to the circular economy, which is very impressive and shows how cross-cutting circularity is in most of the activities of our economic sectors. Donc maintenant, on va passer à Madame.
Now we'll turn to Madame Soya. Thanks for joining us at the panel. We would like to have the perspective of a country member of the Alliance, knowing that Chad is the one receiving most of the support from the circular facility for your roadmap on circular economy. So we would like to have your perspective on this experience regarding this process. So what are the advantages, the success, and the challenges that you have faced?
Okay, merci.
Thank you.
Je suis lectrice de la lutte contre le changement climatique et
I'm an expert in
l'espérance
environmental
environnementale du Tchad,
in
du
Chad,
ministère de l'Environnement,
from the Ministry of
de la Pêche et du
Environment,
Développement durable.
of Sustainable
Je suis ici
Development.
en tant que
I'm
représentant
here
du
as a
ministère.
representative of the ministry.
Okay. Nous avons essayé
We
de
tried
mettre en place
to
au niveau de notre
implement
pays
in our
une
country
plateforme qui
a
prend en compte
platform which takes into account
qui prend en compte toutes les parties prenantes,
all the
savoir les secteurs
stakeholders
qui
from
œuvrent
the,
dans la
meaning all
protection
the
de
sectors
l'environnement, des ONG,
working
des
in
organisations
environmental
non
safeguard,
gouvernementales,
NGOs,
les associations,
associations,
permettent de créer des
which
opportunités.
allow to create opportunities.
Nos politiques ont déjà pris en compte
We have already taken into account
les stratégies
the
en matière de
strategies
l'adaptation et de
for
l'atténuation.
mitigation and adaptation.
Le plan national
The
d'adaptation.
national plan
No, le
for
projet
adaptation.
national
Sorry,
d'adaptation
says the speaker.
a déjà
The
été
national
intégré
project for adaptation
dans
was
nos-
already mainstreamed
nos politiques
in
nationales
our
de
national
développement provinciaux,
policy of
la-
provincial
l'adaptation
development,
au changement
the
climatique
adaptation
sensible
to
au genre.
climate,
Donc, pour dire qu'à
gender-based
ce niveau,
climate
déjà, les
adaptation.
bases sont déjà
So at
posées.
that level, we've
Il
already
reste
set the
l'organisation et la
basic.
mise en
Now
œuvre
we
de
need,
ces projets.
what is left to
Donc,
do
ça
is
prend
the
en compte tout ce qui
implementation
est
with
économie
this
circulaire,
project,
tout ce qui
taking
est
into
la
account
lutte
all
en
what is
matière,
related
tout
to
ce qui est,
circular
la
economy,
lutte en matière de changement, des effets du
fight
changement climatique.
against the impact of climate change.
Il reste seulement à réviser la PND au
We
niveau
still
national,
have
donc
to
le plan national de
revise
développement,
the national plan
pour
of
que
development
ça soit au
for
niveau national, parce que
to
le
implement
premier
it
étape,
at the
c'était
national
intégrer
level,
d'abord
because the third step was to integrate
l'adaptation
the
dans
adaptation
dans les plans de développement
to the
provinciaux.
provincial development plan.
Et puis ça prend aussi en compte, on ne peut pas faire
It
l'adaptation sans
also takes
l'atténuation. Donc
into
ça
an
prend
account
déjà
that you cannot
directement
carry
en compte
adaptation without mitigation.
l'atténuation qui
So
est
it also takes into an account
diminution de
mitigation,
gaz à effet de
meaning the
serre.
reduction of greenhouse gas
La
emissions,
direction de l'éducation qui est en charge
the Directorate for Education, which
de l'économie circulaire a déjà
Education to Environment, which manages the
déjà
circular economy,
contacté
already
les
got in
entreprises qui sont
touch
intéressées
with companies
par l'économie
interested
circulaire dans le
in
recyclage des pneus, par
the
exemple,
in
et puis le
recycling
recyclage
the tires, for example, or
de
the recycling
plastique.
of plastic.
Certaines associations sont en train
Some
de fabriquer
associations are
des
also
objets recyclés.
manufacturing recycled objects.
En matière de sensibilisation,
As for
la direction de
awareness,
l'éducation environnementale est
RAINIC,
également en train de faire
Environmental
des efforts
Education
dans
Directorate is
instaurer
also making
l'éducation
endeavors
environnementale dans le milieu
to
scolaire, dans les
introduce
écoles,
environmental
avec la mise en
education in the
place de clubs
school system
environnementaux
with
qui
the
sont
organization of
sensibilisés, qui sont
environmental
formés
clubs
pour
to
arriver
raise awareness
à
on
créer des entreprises.
the creation of
entreprises vertes.
green companies.
Merci.
Thank you.
Est-ce que j'ai répondu à la
Merci, Madame Soya.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sua.
Donc, je vais donner
So I'm
l'opportunité
now going to give the opportunity to the audience to ask maybe a first series of questions before I go back to the panelists.
So it's already translated. So
Yes, it is translated.
I can continue.
Yes.
So yes, we would like to give you guys an opportunity to ask a first set of questions before we go back to the panelists. Given what Madam Ambassador, Madam Davina and Madam Soya have shared about their respective experiences and efforts by the government of Finland, by the African Development Bank through the alliance and the facility, and the direct experience of Chad with developing their roadmaps. Do you have any questions about those respect? Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm Ivan Amani. I'm from Uganda. I work with Uganda Biodiversity Trust Fund. I want to pick on just two things. First of all, thank you for the very, very good opening remarks and the sharing. One thing from Your Excellency, the Ambassador, is to thank you for the support to this circular economy kind of gospel. I would want to learn from you if there are particular lessons from north to south in terms of comparisons that we can pick up on what works where and how to borrow from what is working in the north that could work in the south. The other thing I wanted to pick up on was from my brother's opening remarks. On the issue of awareness, I agree that it's good, but it has two faces. One face is that we tend to assume that people are aware, especially the policymakers, from the policymaker level to the last mile users or consumers. So it's important to pick this up. But the other face is the question of to what end, or what sort of action can be triggered by this awareness. I know for sure that in East Africa, we have countries that have had shifts in how they behave, how the practices, and they've left their neighbors behind. Why are things not moving? How can we trigger action from this awareness? The whole world out there is waiting for us to shift from speeches to action. So I felt that we could learn a little bit more about the strategies to get awareness yielding in terms of action. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great questions. Mm-hmm. We have another hand in the back.
Merci. C'est Dr. Brahim.
Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim Taye, General Director of Sustainable Development in the Ministry of Environment of Chad. So, as the director said, the subject around which we're working is a crucial subject for social development, for environment protection, and for economic efficiency. You have to say it. In the COP, we saw a lot of meetings, and the whole issue of related to funding. It's always a problem of financing which is highlighted. In Africa, the main stake of development is a reduction of extreme poverty. How can you
à avoir les minimums nécessaires.
Help
Ça, c'est les
support the
réalités.
people so they get the minimum
Donc,
necessary
La
income.
pauvreté,
That's reality. So
ça s'explique
poverty,
de la même façon, mais ça ne
overwhelming.
s'explique pas de la même façon.
Seems to be the same thing, but it's not done in the same way
Maintenant, par rapport
on the
à nos
entire
réalités,
planet. Now, if
vous avez
we focus
dit
on
tout à l'heure par
our
rapport à la
reality,
Banque
as
africaine
you
de
said
développement,
in the African
quels
Bank for
sont
Development, what
outils et les
are the
mécanismes
tools and the mechanisms
appropriés et adaptés
appropriate
pour la mise en œuvre
to implement
de cette thématique
this
de la circularité
subject of
ici.
circularity
Alors,
here?
je prends un exemple comme l'a souligné tout à l'heure.
I'm going to take an example.
Au Tchad,
In Chad,
dans certaines villes,
in some cities,
on a créé de l'emploi
jobs
autour
were
du
created
recyclage.
around recycling.
Au départ, c'était pas la question de la
At the
protection de
beginning, it was
l'environnement,
not
c'était
so
pour
much an issue
améliorer
of
la journée,
environment protection, just to improve
Les gens viennent essayer
the
de
livelihood
fouiller un
of
peu
people.
partout
It
dans
means
le-
people try to are
dans les
here
dépotoirs
looking
pour
for
voir les bouteilles, on les
waste
vend à 25
to
francs,
collect
à 50
bottles
francs,
and they
etc.,
sell
pour
them at
allonger un peu les revenus.
25 francs or
Et petit à
30
petit,
francs to
à côté,
improve
il y a
their
aussi des
income. And
startups
little by
qui
little,
naissent
there's also
avec
startups being
de nouvelles
created
technologies.
with new
On
technology
fait la promotion, comme
which
elle l'a très bien souligné.
promote, as it was
Par exemple, des
highlighted,
objets usés. À
of-
partir des objets usés, on donne une seconde
I mean,
vie à un nouveau objet.
giving a second life
Et donc là,
to
on est
an object which
dans les actions
has already had a first
sans se
life.
rendre compte
So
que nous
that's
sommes en train de
action, that's
contribuer
just action without realizing that we
à
are
cette
indeed
atténuation,
contributing
ou bien contribuer
to
à la
this
protection de
mitigation of
l'environnement. Donc,
poverty. You
l'économie, le
you
social et
contribute both to
l'environnement, on l'a
environment
toujours dit,
protection,
c'est des choses que nous
social
ne pouvons pas les
protection,
séparer,
and
mais
economy.
pour
Are
les
things which
traiter,
are
on va essayer de faire la
integrated.
part des choses.
But you have to try and find what
la
are the
question,
different rules
quels
of
sont les
each.
mécanismes
So the
aujourd'hui
question is, what are the
qui sont
mechanisms
mis en
today
place au niveau
implemented
de l'Afrique
in Africa
pour accompagner cette
accompany
contribution. Je
this
vous remercie.
contribution? Thank you very much.
On va prendre peut-être une dernière question.
Maybe
Maybe
a last question.
All right, thank you. My name is Rita Idehai, and I run a circular economy business in Nigeria, and I'm also the president of the Recyclers Association of Nigeria. So my question first is to Ambassador. Does Finland have any program to fund local initiatives in Nigeria and across other African countries? That's the first one. And then the second question is to I'm trying to get the name again. Yes, is AfDB. So I'm a part of the Youth Adapt. I was one of the winners in 2022. And yes, thank you. But I think the question is there a mechanism, or is the African Development Bank looking for a way to reach local initiatives that, are probably not on social media, do not know how to complete grant applications and stuff like that? Because like you said, the circular economic principles are things that are traditional to us, and so most of the actors, most of the people leading the actual work on the ground are people that probably do not even know how to write this application. So is there a funding mechanism? Is there a way to reach, those people, maybe leveraging on cooperatives, leveraging on associations such as ours, or just generally communities of people working on the ground? So is there a way you're planning to reach them and, fund and support initiatives to scale? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll start with these first few. I think there's 5 in total, and I think we know more or less who is appointed to answer them. So I don't know, Madam Ambassador, do you want to start? So there was 2 questions specifically for you. One regarding North-South collaboration and learnings we can take and contextualize and apply from the North to Africa. And then the second one regarding programs and initiatives, programs to support local initiatives that are run by Finland, if there's any.
Sure, yeah, thank you so much. I'll start with responding briefly to the last question, and apologies that I don't have any further information with me here now, but we'll also take that question back to Helsinki. But we do engage in a policy dialogue on circular economy with African countries, and in fact, my understanding, and I'm saying my understanding because I'm working here now, not in Helsinki, but South Africa was the first one, but we have others to come as well. And as just an example, there we're funding innovative circular economy startup companies, their growth acceleration since 2020 already, and working with other partners as well. And by now we're supporting approximately 250 companies. So I think this is something that we will continue to do with our African, other partners as well. And that's one example of the type of thing that we do. And I think that also tells you that, we don't want to think about this in terms of some kind of traditional development assistance. I mean, it's about really a new economic model that we're helping to support, to build, both in Finland, but also globally, because in the end, it's going to have to be a public-private partnership and very much private companies and innovative solutions that are involved in the end. And then in terms of North-South cooperation, I mean, first of all, I think here in this COP, the good thing is that I think we have a feeling, maybe all of us Europeans, certainly as Finns, that this kind of a traditional North-South divide has been a bit broken, and we all have a recognition that we need to work together. And when it comes to transfer of knowledge, I think, we Finns are very pragmatic, and so instead of thinking about it as a competition, we really are willing to share best practices, because we find that really in the end is a win-win situation. So if I think about some of these things, I mean, since circular economy presents an opportunity to decouple economic growth from resource consumption and to promote regional value chains, we see this as something it's good for Europe if African countries and if the African continent can do that. So, because what strengthens the self-sufficiency of countries in the African continent and reduces dependency on external resources, and builds resilience against external shocks, in the end is good for maintaining stability on that continent, and therefore also maintaining global stability. And so for us, anything that we can do on that front is good. Now, a couple of areas where we're very much looking at as important ones, and where I think there is also, again, the sharing of best practices possible, is anything to do with reuse, remanufacturing, recycling, and renewable energy. Finland is big on forestry-related any kind of industry, but also solutions that we're looking at, construction and textiles and food, others as well. So I wouldn't go into some details on these, but I think in the end, I think we're ready to work on together with our partners in the African continent on really building a new economic model for the future and bringing well-being. As I said, my own background is working on conflicts and preventing them, and again, I say it's also about that, and therefore about not only saving our planet, but also making sure that it's a stable and sustainable one.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Madam Ambassador.
Merci,
Davina,
Madame.
you had a couple of
Davina,
questions
il y a eu des questions de la part pour la banque.
How we go from awareness
Comment
raising to triggering action?
on sensibilise
And,
comment on passe de sensibiliser à mener des actions, et quelles sont les initiatives, comment soutenir les communautés locales dans les villages qui pourraient être capables de bénéficier d'un soutien additionnel par rapport aux outils, et savoir que des personnes un peu plus éduquées savent déjà utiliser. Donc, comment aider ces communautés locales?
How do we move from awareness to action? Indeed, this was tagged as the COP for Action. And I think what we are trying to do through the ASE Alliance, the Africa Circular Economy Alliance, is to create that shift to action, and specifically focusing on the action that there is already. The lady from Nigeria, who's a winner of the Youth Adapt competition, is already action. She's not on the awareness. She already knows that there's an opportunity. And the one case that we get out of circular economy is actually the market works. That even without climate finance as we might target, the market already works. That's why there is a lot of businesses at that level. It might be very small micro level, but it's there, it's feeding families. And so the job upon us is to scale that, that those businesses are resilient, are sustainable, and they're taking us to long-term development. So what are we doing in that space? At the Africa Circular Economy Facility, as I mentioned, this facility is a startup facility. It was actually designed to see how the market is. And so it's a $4 million euro facility over the 5 years to understand the business concept of how circular economy operates. Now, and the components are on policy, supporting countries develop the right policies, and two, to support startups. So we are doing, we're supporting innovation hubs in that you get an aggregation. The gentleman from Chad was talking about accompagnement. How to handhold the businesses around scaling their business case. I remember very well, like 2 years ago, on a panel with a circular economy developer, and his story was that I'm not quoting him. I'm not looking for money to even scale my business. I know this business will be scaled. The money I'm looking for is to make the case, because when I go to the bank, I'm asked for a market study. We don't have that data on market study. I know I can recycle things and there's a market, but when I'm asked for a market study, I don't have those resources to do feasibilities. And so that is where we want to focus. And at the facility, what we want to show, the case we want to show is we've created this need through the incubation. The next phase should be to scale up with the cohorts that the lady from Nigeria is talking about. They've done the work. How do we meet them? Now, the bank has funds for that through the different initiatives. As you know, if you go on our website, we have a youth entrepreneurship program, a 30 million facility for that. We have SME funds through our private sector funds, but we're a public development bank, so most of our lending goes to governments. And sometimes we own lend to commercial banks that are supposed to be the intermediary that meets the level of that scale. But we are realizing that that's not good enough. And so part of our work here is to talk to our donors, to talk to our shareholders, to shift the model in a way that we can meet where the demand is. And the demand is at the base of the pyramid. That's where the businesses are. That's where actually Africa's wealth is at. When you aggregate the money that transacts at a small scale, that is where we should be focusing. Currently, our traditional model was not focusing there. We're looking to move into that phase. And so with the alliance and the facility, that is our next step. When we created this, we didn't know how the market was looking. So over the 3 years, the facility was approved in 2022. So this is 1 year of it being operational. In the next year, we hope to have gotten a good base to make a case that this is a viable project. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Davina. And this is a key point, and I like the question you asked because we often get questions around, the African Development Bank and other financial institutions are doing a lot of great things in terms of provision of capital and support through different facilities, but how does this actually get to the end user or to the actual businesses? How do we make it easier for that connection to be shorter and quicker so that people can truly feel that you are actually having this direct impact at the grassroots level? So we look forward to the next steps next year for the facility to hopefully get there. We also had a question. Sorry, Madam Ambassador, you wanted to add a point regarding awareness raising and education? Sure.
No, thanks. I realize I forgot to say something very important, because this is something that Finland is very much working on with our African partners, which is education. And when I talk about education, I mean, that's when we get into awareness raising, but also about talking about even scaling up businesses, because, that's about skills development, about that type of thing, and just simply empowering people to actually act to prevent climate change, and in this case that we're talking about, to work on the circular economy. So we're working very much with a number of countries on the African continent to support education in different ways, and from really child to adult. And just wanted to really mention that, because it's something also that's very close to my heart.
Thank you. So I think, there was one last question from the gentleman from Chad regarding support mechanisms for businesses that tend to start organically, I would say, that are often informal, but that would ideally benefit from support in being identified as circular businesses and the contribution they bring to this agenda. How do we put together mechanisms to support them?
So first of all, I would encourage everybody to reach us through our website, asiaafrica.org. Ideally, to have a conversation, to carry this conversation virtually, although we also have a contact link there. One, to get your ideas, to create that platform where your ideas are able to reach beyond your space to the continental and global agenda. Honorable Ambassador mentioned the World Circular Economy Forum. We are always there. This is, I think, the third year that Africa has been represented at that forum. It happened in Kigali. It is going to happen in Brussels next year. The idea is to take Africa's solutions to the global scale. And how can we do it? We already have created the ASEA program. The ASEA network actually has 13 countries. When the bank started hosting it, it had only 3 member countries. Now with 13 countries, including Chad, plus 15 other strategic members. Those strategic members are foundations, academia, institutions of the UN, UNEP, and so there's already a good resource in terms of technical assistance, in terms of diversity on approaches. So the idea is to get as many ideas onto that platform to enable us make the case. Again, I said we are a public development bank. We are demand driven. So each and every African country is a shareholder of the bank. So we take your demand and articulate it. And so what we would want to see is that circular economy makes it to NDCs, makes it to the ability to make a business case for it in a way that it becomes market mature so that the private sector gets interested. Again, we see as we get to 2030, it is the lowest hanging fruit because it has the base of Africa's youth, Africa's women, Africa's generation, ideally. So just to quickly respond to that question, we have the platform, reach out to us. There are already instruments. I mentioned the hub that we've created to make sure that for those SMEs that are already involved, the incubation hub perfects those business proposals. Most cases when you talk to funders, talk to GCF, they're like, no, the projects are not bankable. So what we are trying to make the case is to make sure that those projects actually articulate the climate rationale in them in a way that they can be, that you can get funds, concession or financing, either from the green global funds or from national green funds. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Davina. So we are approaching time. So maybe one last question to our panelists would be, we would love for the circular economy to become more pervasive and for greater awareness around its opportunities, especially among decision makers, whether it's at the country level or in the development space more broadly speaking. In your opinion, as we're closing this session, what are the key challenges you would like to see addressed as immediate priorities in order to expand the impact of circularity on the continent and achieve, the job creation, the positive impact on the environment, the economic growth that we're aiming through circularity? What are the one or two things that you're not seeing yet that you would love to see change in the space in order to make it happen? Madame Thierry, vous voulez commencer?
Madame, do you want to start?
Ok, merci.
Thank you.
J'aimerais d'abord
So I would like that I'm really pleased to be on this stage with great ladies that are really committed on circularity.
Ok, par rapport à
So
la question,
regarding the question,
je pense que
I think
nous aimerions bien
we would like
avoir au niveau du Tchad
to have at the
notre
level of
plateforme
Chad
nationale,
our national platform
qui peut inclure toutes les
that
parties
can
prenantes,
include
les ONG,
all
les
the stakeholders
associations, tous les
with
gens qui
the
œuvrent en
association,
faveur
all
de
the people
la lutte contre le changement climatique.
struggling against climate
Et
change.
nous avons aussi ardemment besoin
And we really urgently need
d'un soutien et des
a
orientations
support and orientations to be
arriver
able
à réaliser ces
to
objectifs.
reach those type of objectives. Thank
Merci
you.
Okay.
Davina?
Yeah, I'll point to two things. Oops, sorry. I'll point to two things. One is I mentioned ASEA, and I keep going back to ASEA, the Africa Circular Economy Alliance that was created by African countries. It is actually an AMSEN mandate, the African Ministerial Conference on Environment, which is the entity that leads in terms of Africa's voice on climate-related issues. They mandated countries to join the alliance again to make or harness the opportunity on circularity. So there was an encouragement. All African countries were written to join the alliance. Today we are at 13. Please be our advocates. Unless Africa comes together to make their case, it is disappointing that 3 years down the road, only 13 countries have responded to a call to themselves. It wasn't a North call. It was African ministers calling on to themselves. And only 13 countries have joined the alliance. And so when we sit here, talk about issues, the gentleman who talked about awareness and action, it is through that we can only mobilize action when we get the collective right. So yeah, number one, let's build the alliance. Let's get the countries into the alliance to make the right, articulate the need. Two, data. Circularity is all about efficiency. Efficiency is in numbers. You have a baseline, you look at the journey or resource saving. Now, you can only do that with data. So ideally, we need to get our academia or research institutions into this space because we can't negotiate or even do a market deal without the right data. And so those are two areas that I think as a continent we need to work on. And we have the institutions. We have the free trade area, the Africa Free Trade, Continental Free Trade area. These are some of the trade issues that I think we should be looking at. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Davina. Madam Ambassador,
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, I think the need to come together, first of all, among the African countries on that continent, but also, of course, more globally. And I think there, I would say that my plea would be for allowing the multilateral framework and let's say the UN to, let's empower that multilateral framework to bring us all together. We have a situation around the world with multiple crises and a lot of tensions that have nothing to, or have, let's say, climate change is something that has indirectly to do with everything, I think. But so we need to really empower the multilateral framework and the UN in particular, I think, to bring us all together on this. So that would really be, I think, my sort of first thing. And then just other than that, I mean, I think we know all the issues we need to work on. So whatever we can do to empower everyone to act. So again, I come back to education. I come back to the fact that we need to make sure, first of all, that everyone has the awareness. Once they have the awareness, they need to be empowered one way or another to be able to contribute. And in circular economy, I think that is actually one of the easiest ones where we can do the empowering. Ending fossil fuels is not up to every child in every village, right? But if every child in every village learns what this is about and learns. I like the idea of going to the sort of our traditional way of working in Finland too. It's for us it's a tradition. We need to go back to that.
Thank you so much. So please make a round of applause for our panelists. And I would also highlight that this is one of the very few all-female panels at COP. So I'm very pleased to have had the opportunity to moderate this session. Thanks again to the three of you. Thanks for highlighting the need for us to collaborate, to empower, to make the case. And when the case is already made, when we're seeing businesses that are already successful at a smaller scale, how do we help them actually get to a higher scale? Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's session. Thank you.